Right, let's dive right in to this case study. This is going to be a fascinating one. It's a veterinary case study that really has us rethinking what we know about bromethalin poisoning in cats, and particularly the concept of delayed death, even after a cat appears to be recovering well.
Yeah.
This isn't just any old poisoning case.
Right.
This one raises a lot of questions about what we know about the long-term effects.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes this case so interesting is it was published in the Journal of Veterinary Emergency and Critical Care.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just, one of those things that somebody said happened to their friend's cat's cousin or something like that.
Right.
This was really deemed significant enough to be published in a very reputable journal, which suggests that there are some lessons to be learned here.
Okay, so let's break down exactly what happened in this case. Why is this case such a head-scratcher?
So the case involved a 2-year-old male cat that ingested an estimated 0.32 milligrams of bromethalin per kilogram of body weight.
Okay.
Now that's below the minimum lethal dose, but still significant.
Okay.
And initially, he showed those classic paralytic signs, got worse, and then improved dramatically with treatment.
Oh.
But here's the unsettling part. He was found dead 9 days after going home, seemingly out of the blue.
Wait, so he was discharged while he was still improving?
Uh-huh.
That sounds like a good sign, right?
You would think so. But the necropsy revealed the cause of death to be transforaminal brain herniation.
Wow.
Essentially, part of the cerebellum was forced through the opening at the base of the skull due to pressure.
So even though he seemed to be getting better, the damage was silently progressing and ultimately led to this delayed herniation.
Exactly. And that's the real kicker here.
Yeah.
This is the first reported instance of this kind of delayed death in a cat, despite the initial positive response to treatment.
Wow.
So it suggests that even when we see improvement, we may not be out of the woods.
Okay, so let's back up for a second and talk about the treatment this cat received. I understand they really went all out. Can you give us like a little highlight reel?
Absolutely. So he got a very comprehensive treatment plan, including osmotherapy with hypertonic saline and mannitol to reduce swelling,
Okay.
corticosteroids for inflammation. They even used intralipid emulsion, which acts as a lipid sink to draw out those fat-soluble toxins.
Wow.
And they even went so far as to use ginkgo biloba and thiamine for their antioxidant properties.
So it sounds like the veterinary team was incredibly thorough.
They were,
Yeah,
and yet the cats still succumbed to those delayed effects of the poisoning.
So this really raises a lot of questions like, are current treatment strategies even enough? Could we be doing more to address the ongoing damage even after the initial symptoms subside?
Exactly, and that's really the burning question here.
Right. What could have been done differently? And I think even more importantly, how do we prevent something like this from happening again?
Right, and those are the million-dollar questions that this case really forces us to ask ourselves.
Yeah. It really makes you wonder about those cases where a cat appears to recover, and then you're like, oh, they're good. And then maybe something like this happens later.
Yeah.
Could there be other cases out there where things like this happen and nobody really notices?
That's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times we're relying on owner observation for follow-up.
Right.
And some of these neurological signs can be pretty subtle.
Totally.
So, they might not even notice that there's something going on.
You mentioned MRI could be a useful tool in cases like this. What kind of information could that give us?
So an MRI can actually show us what's going on inside the brain and spinal cord.
Okay.
We can actually visualize, areas of swelling, inflammation, and even those white matter lesions that are characteristic of bromethalin.
Oh, wow.
So even though an MRI wasn't performed in this case, the necropsy findings were consistent with what we would likely see on an MRI.
So you're saying it could help us identify animals that are at higher risk for these delayed complications, even if they seem to be recovering well initially?
Exactly. It could give us a more accurate prognosis and help us tailor those treatment plans.
Okay, let's go back to the treatment that this cat received, some of the interventions like osmotherapy and corticosteroids. Those are pretty standard for brain swelling, right?
Right. Those are often our go-to treatments
Yeah.
for reducing brain swelling and inflammation.
I've read that those might not be as helpful as we once thought, though.
Right.
Is that because of how bromethalin damages the brain?
Exactly. So bromethalin doesn't just cause this generalized brain swelling.
Okay.
It causes a very specific type of damage called spongy degeneration
Oh, wow.
of the white matter.
Okay.
And this is where the myelin sheath, which is the protective covering around the nerve fibers, is actually damaged. And that leads to fluid buildup within the myelin itself.
Okay.
So your traditional osmotherapy and corticosteroids might not be as effective.
at addressing this specific type of edema.
Exactly.
Okay, so those treatments might not be targeting the problem directly.
Right.
Then what about some of the less conventional treatments that they use, like intralipid emulsion and ginkgo biloba?
Yeah.
What's the thought process behind using those?
So intralipid emulsion, or ILE, it's kind of gaining popularity in veterinary medicine for certain poisonings.
Yeah.
And it basically acts as what we call a lipid sink.
Okay.
So it binds to those fat-soluble toxins like bromethalin and prevents them from reaching their target organs.
So it's like pulling it out of the bloodstream.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And what about ginkgo biloba? I know that's often talked about with its antioxidant properties.
Right. So ginkgo biloba is thought to protect cells from damage caused by free radicals, which are those unstable molecules that can damage cells and tissues.
Yeah.
So in the context of bromethalin poisoning, it might help reduce damage to the brain and spinal cord.
But even with all of these treatments, conventional and less conventional, this cat didn't make it.
That's right. And it just goes to show how much we still don't know about the long-term effects of this poison.
So we need more research to understand how these treatments work and if there are other potentially more effective approaches that we should consider.
Exactly.
Okay, so it seems like prevention is really going to be key here. What steps can pet owners take to prevent these types of poisonings in the first place?
Well, the most important thing is to prevent access to rodenticides that contain bromethalin.
Of course.
If you have to use them, make sure they're stored safely, out of reach of pets. And also, consider alternative pest control methods that are less toxic to the animal.
Okay, and then if an owner suspects that their pet has ingested bromethalin, what should they do?
Immediate veterinary attention is critical.
Okay.
The sooner we can initiate treatment, the better the chances of a positive outcome.
So this case is a really good reminder that early intervention and aggressive treatment are super important.
Absolutely. And it also underscores the fact that we still have a lot to learn about bromethalin poisoning.
We do.
We need to continue to research this toxin so we can develop better diagnostic tools, treatment strategies, and prevention methods.
This case study really gives us some valuable insight that can help improve the care we provide to animals affected by this toxin.
It really does.
So where do we go from here? What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think first and foremost, be aware that even when treatment appears successful, the danger might not be over. Delayed complications are possible, and they can be fatal.
So vigilance is key even after your cat seems to have recovered. What else? So vigilance is key even after your cat seems to recover. What else?
We need to rethink our approach to follow-up care. More intensive monitoring and potentially repeat imaging might be necessary.
To catch those delayed complications? This also highlights the importance of educating owners right.
Absolutely.
They need to understand those subtle signs that might indicate trouble. Even after their cat has been discharged.
We need owners to be active participants in their pet's recovery. They are our eyes and ears at home.
This case study really feels like a wake-up call for the veterinary community. It's showing us that we still have a lot to learn about bromethalin and its long-term effects.
It really does, and that's the crux of the matter.
We need more research to identify risk factors for these delayed complications. Develop better treatment and prevention strategies. It's a daunting task, and also an incredibly important one.
It is.
This case, though, tragic, could lead to significant advancements in how we approach bromethalin poisoning.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that we need to remain vigilant, continue to question our assumptions, and strive to improve the care we provide.
Absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us all a lot to think about. It's a stark reminder that bromethalin poisoning is a complex and potentially devastating condition, even when initial treatment seems successful.
From Vet Neurojar, keep those minds-inspired hearts light and tails wagging.